He was 2 hours later than his usual time of arriving home from work. His wife was ready with a keg of hostility. "Where have you been? Why so late?" He said, "Just let me tell you. I was called in for an interview for a new job." And she replied, "What's wrong with the old job?" "This new job," he said, "will pay me an extra $120,000 a year, plus a car." "Oh, yes," she said, "and where's the catch?" "Yes," he said, "and it carries 3 overseas trips a year." And she had her word to say. "And who's going to look after things at home while you're gallivanting around the world?" So you see, within 2.5 minutes of arriving home, the promise of happiness had collided 4 times with a negative response that would threaten to bring the prospects of happiness into a heap at their feet. Happiness. The sage of the book of Ecclesiastes, what did he say? "There is nothing good for us except to be happy and live the best life we can while we are alive." The other day I picked up a glossy magazine and turned its pages, and my eye fell on one particular page, an advertisement that says, "Happiness begins here." What a promise. Happiness begins now. Happiness begins with you. But we know that happiness has frequently been choked by suspicions, blocked by conditions. We're so much part of a world where happiness has collapsed so many times, and its promises have proven to be false. Listen to these words of Dr. Robert Sapolsky of Stanford University. He says, "Few of us will die from the bubonic plague or from malnutrition or those other horrific diseases. Instead," he said, "we will die of diseases of slow accumulation of damage, the gradual blocking of blood vessels, the slow derangement of metabolism, of adult onset diabetes, the repeated challenge and ultimate defeat that is cancer. Lifestyle, emotional temperament, and psychological factors have virtually nothing to do with how a body manages the exposure to those massive external trauma or the airborne diseases. But they have much to do with some of our most common Western diseases. Insofar as chronic unhappiness and anxiety and depression can cause sustained overactivation of the stress response, they increase the risk of those major diseases, and the price we pay can be very high." Way back in earliest biblical times, people knew that they ought to pursue happiness. It was for them to pursue. But today we take notice of the words of Martin Bergman when he says, religion is an illusion that has failed to make its believers happy. And you could believe that as we gather in church, as people gather for church. We all look a fairly unhappy lot, don't we, at times? And yet here we might hear those words from the advertisement. Happiness begins here. Does it? Well, psychologists in large and growing numbers are convincing us that they know what the pathways of happiness will be, that happiness is a pathway to better health. Yes, is it? And yet with all the pathways mapped out, and with all the wealth and riches and the goods and the gadgets that we have accumulated in our current world, we can so easily succumb to disillusionment, to psychological pain, to massive inability to cope constructively with our frustrations every day. And the huge consumption of drugs of one kind or another are there to back us up because we've lost touch with this greatest of gifts, our happiness. Thanks to a member of my Sage group last Thursday, I dug out of my shelves Bruce Lipton's book called The Biology of Belief. He is a professor of biology in America, a man of high achievement, but in the very first page of his book, he tells how he has long wrestled with the question, if only I could be somebody else but me. If only I could be anybody but me. My personal life, he said, was at best a shambles. The harder I tried to find happiness and satisfaction in my personal life, the more dissatisfied and unhappy I became. I resolved to surrender to my unhappy state. I decided that fate had dealt me a bad hand, and I had better simply make the best of it. But then I turned the pages. Indeed, the very next page he says, my depressed, fatalistic attitude changed in one transformational moment. One transformational moment. Well, not all of us are going to have that one transformational moment, though we might look for it. But today I'd like to put to you the possibility of being part of an evolutionary transformation as I focus on this issue of our happiness. The threats to our happiness, the promises of our happiness, and then I'm going to put on the end of it several ways whereby religion, your religion, can play a positive role in your happiness. One man told me the other day that his wife said, "You know, you're never happy." So he said, I turned to her and I said, "But what is happiness?" And it's a difficult task, isn't it? We all talk about happiness. The Bible talks about happiness. The studies talk about happiness. But what is it? What are we looking for? If we're not sure what we're looking for, we shouldn't be too surprised if we don't find it. It is different, of course, for each one of us, but the threats are common for all of us. The happiness that I want, yes, it has 4 or 5 critical ingredients. I want to positively manage my everyday anxieties. I want a stable engagement with the tasks of each day. I want a sense of my identity, myself, in harmony with others. And I want those search engines of faith that keeps me in focus and that keeps reviving my resilience. Perhaps I'm not far from Bertrand Russell's definition of it too in his little book written many years ago called The Conquest of Happiness. He says, happiness is when a person is emancipated from the empire of worry. It is to have free affections and wide interests. It is to have a sense of harmony in yourself and with society. It is to feel oneself a citizen of the universe, enjoying freely the spectacle that it offers and the joys it affords. They were his ideas on happiness. How about yours? If you think about what is the happiness you're looking for, what will be the ingredients? Well, today I'm talking about the threats to your happiness and the promises of happiness. I'm going to take the threats first, 3 of them. The way various losses can capsize our sense of the goodness of life and the meaning of life and the best engagement of life. Losses can erode our happiness and can snatch happiness from us. The many losses. Number 1, threat. We need to watch them. Number 2 is that we can miss that transformational moment. We can miss the inspirational moment. We can miss the significance of the person at this moment in front of you. I've quoted before that 1903 statement of Leo Tolstoy. He said, "Remember, There is only one time that is important, and it is now. It is the most important time because it is the only time when we have any power. The most necessary person is the one who is with you. For no one knows if you will ever have dealings with anyone else. And the most important affair is to do them good, because for that reason alone, you were sent into this life. Missing the great threat, number 2 threat, is to miss that moment, miss that experience, miss that person. Threat number 3, I succumb. The tendency to succumb to the unhappy state, succumb to the power of the negative state, succumb to the decline of my body's state, succumb to the burden of it all. Most of you will have seen Michael J. Fox, the once brilliant young actor who gradually, or maybe all too quickly, developed Parkinson's disease. He could have succumbed to that disease and all the misery that went with it. And he did. He had the disease all right, and it developed. But he set up the Michael J. Fox Research Foundation into Parkinson's disease. And more than that, he said this in the last page of his book. This is what he said: remember, though you alone are responsible for your own happiness, it's still okay to feel responsible for someone else's. There's threat number 3, that we're likely to succumb to that unhappy state. So I move to the promises, and there are 3. I want to say this. Number 1, invest in something that gives a good focus into the future. Be part of that process. When I was in early grades in primary school, the teacher wrote across the top of the blackboard a saying, words that were not erased, they remained there for the 3 years at which he taught that class, that school. Every morning, these words became part of our future. And here I am remembering them and saying them again and again years later, and I've used them before in this place. The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on. Nor all your piety nor wit can lure it back to cancel half a line, nor all your tears wash out a word of it. Be part of that process of the moving finger writes and having writ moves on, because so easily you can get stuck. Invest in that movement forwards. Number 1. Number 2. Who is Burt Bacharach? Who was Burt Bacharach? Of course you know. One of the best American songwriters of the 20th century and his magic moments. The quote in a book of wisdom has one page devoted to Burt Bacharach, and this is the quote from his own life. He said, I have notes in my bathroom, those little yellow notes, and I stick them on the mirror of my bathroom. Things that happened that were uplifting boosters for me. Notes that say, one note says, today is special. Make it count. And then I have one note, he says, in the middle that says, look at the other notes. So there is a promise of keeping that alive, keeping that possibility, being part of that moment. The third promise. By experience and learned wisdom, we know that we will not and cannot be happy all the time, cannot be happy in every situation, cannot be happy with every person, cannot be happy in every project in which we participate. We know that. The promise is the gift of the soothing of your pain, the strengthening in your weakness, the compensation for your loss, the compassion for all your suffering, the rising above your worst situation, the discovery of a good spirit, the energy of a new faith, that gives new meaning to the past and a powerful courage to live a different future. 3 promises: a good focus into the future, embracing the present, making today count, and a way of finding happiness when happiness seems to be on holiday, finding that little compensation for all that is happening to you. What role then will religion play in your pursuit of happiness? For many centuries, religious people of the Bible have tried to point to happiness as a genuine gift, happiness as a valid part of life, happiness as a given, happiness as something accessible to everyone. But our religion has frequently imposed its conditions. It's dealt in rewards and punishments, in fear and guilt. Couldn't it be done with all those things and talk of happiness? Happiness begins here. Happiness begins now. Well, we've not been terribly successful. So psychology has tried to do that. It has tried hard to steer us in the direction of happiness, but in doing so it wanted to steer clear of all that religious stuff. Probably because it doesn't have a very good understanding of what religion can be. You might say understandably. But along with that, however, psychology has carried out many research projects that have validated the importance of religion. In another place, I have listed some 12 ways in which I believe religion contributes to our happiness. Here today, I tell you, I've taken 3. So I've gone in 3s right through. 3 threats, 3 promises, and now 3 ways whereby religion might contribute to our happiness. Religion, number 1. A good religion gathers people together, brings them out of their fear and isolation, gives them a belonging to something that can give a positive meaning to their life. If you can be part of that, then that will draw you into a happier way of living. Number 1. Number 2, a good religion generates good feelings, generates good values, the values of caring, collaboration, and compassion. If you're part of those good feelings, part of those good values, you're being drawn into the stream of happiness. Number 3, religion aims to forge a peaceful harmony within our own mind and body, a peaceful harmony with other people of sameness or difference, a searching harmony with the best spirit of life. If you're part of this harmony, this search for harmony, then you're in the stream, you're in that good stream of the road to happiness. Of course, there's more to be said, but that will do us. We all want to be happy, surely. Although it is very difficult to find that happiness, very difficult to sustain that happiness, yet it is the sheer inspiration, I believe, the sheer inspiration of human beings and of human existence that people in the most deprived situations, deprived conditions, can show us what happiness can be. That people suffering chronic pain can show us that they can get a glimpse of a moment of happiness. That people who have suffered terrible losses can discover the realities of a new faith, and they can celebrate a happiness that enhances not only their happiness, but the happiness of others. Do you know, after that great earthquake that took place in Japan recently, Kaiko Takahashi, I've quoted her here before, Kaiko Takahashi wrote this poem. She wrote, "People with resolve will stand above this, will walk towards the future. Even if everything is destroyed, they believe something new will be born." Would you please stand? The Bible puts before us a way to live. A good religion puts before us a way to live. I invite you to gather round the holy table Here are the symbols for life, symbols to enrich and enhance the way we live. Would you sing the communion hymn as written on your order of service paper?